baseball podcast. Listener emails that blast. Pedantic baseball chat. Every weekday, break down your favorite pastime. Sit down, relax, and unwind as we learn how Ohtani works.
Hello and welcome to episode 2438 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs and also your Super Bowl winning Seattle Seahawks. I'm joined by Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, who, despite being a sports knower, does not, as far as I know, have an NFL affiliation. Ben, how are you?
Yeah, I would describe myself as a football follower, but not a football fan. And so they are not my Super Bowl winning Seahawks, but they are yours. And
everyone else's.
Yes, all of America's, at least anyone who is rooting against the Patriots, which is most of America's. But I know that this is a baseball podcast, not a football podcast, but we have sadly not had the opportunity to talk about your baseball team winning a championship. So
No, not yet.
I must give you a moment to luxuriate, to take a victory lap here.
I'll say this because, sure, this is a baseball show. But by our definition of baseball shows, I think the Super Bowl is now a baseball show because
of Ronald Acuna Jr.
Yes.
and his cameo in the halftime show.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's
also,
true.
Bad Bunny did a little like imitating like he was hitting a knock out of here.
Yeah.
And also, let me say this. This is not the most meaningful way or the most telling way that Bad Bunny is great. I'll admit to that. I'll stipulate that up front. But I think that baseball fans end up getting exposed to a great deal of Bad Bunny, even if Bad Bunny is not like a regular listen for them, because Bad Bunny is a very popular walk-up song choice for Latino players, a participant in the celebrity softball game, and, a purveyor of concerts after the fact. But also just like Bad Bunny saves us all from having to hear more Morgan Wallen. And for that, I think he is a living saint. But also, what a show. What a time.
Another baseball Bad Bunny connection is that it was reported by Carlos Baerga, I believe. I can't confirm, but there was a report that he tried to pay the insurance premiums for Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, the Puerto Rican players who are not playing, and that he offered to foot the bill, and that offer was rebuffed, I suppose, by the teams or the league or whoever. So don't know if that's true, but it was said at least, and sure, let's give it to him. It would be a nice gesture if so.
Yeah. Also, just like, Acuna was there. Always happy to see Pedro Pascal, never mad about seeing.
So you must be happy all the time then, because you're seeing him
he is everywhere. That's good. I think that's good for us. Also, Ricky Martin, you look great, my guy.
He does. Looks fantastic.
Great. I am thrilled for you. But anyway, it was a halftime show, also a welcome break, because for those who watched, you will know, not like an offensive showcase.
No.
And part of that was a lot of fun for me because I would describe this Seahawks defense as stifling, suffocating in Drake May's business. I hope that that line can enter witness protection, at least briefly, because boy, did that offensive line have a bad day. You got to adjust to the blitz, you got to adjust to the blitz if you're going to win a Super Bowl. And they couldn't do it. I had to listen to people talking about how Josh McDaniels is going to. No, guess what Josh couldn't do? He couldn't figure him out, Ben. He couldn't figure him out. 2 weeks I had to hear about how, Josh McDaniels is going to figure. No, you know who didn't figure him out? Josh McDaniels. Also, Drake May. I do want to allow for him still having had a very impressive season. Great effort. We maybe saw the effects of their soft schedule. I just think that when you go through the gauntlet of the West, of the NFC West, you are battle tested. You are ready to box.
Yeah, we talk about this in baseball sometimes too, when you look at how teams have performed against weaker teams or their strength of schedule. And is it bad if they had a weaker schedule, which absolutely the Patriots did? They also beat up on a lot of the weaker teams they faced. So when you adjust for that, still a strong team. Now, the Seahawks, the reason why they were favored and why ultimately they just ran all over the Patriots is that they had a harder schedule and they also beat up on everyone they faced by a lot too. So even if you adjust for that, then yeah, they were just, I think, a better team. And we don't have to go too deep into football analysis. I do have a couple of baseball thoughts and questions and observations prompted by the Seahawks victory.
Okay.
But I'm sure you'd like to talk a little bit more.
I'm going to let you get to those.
Yes.
I'm going to let you get to them. And I promise I won't go too long here. But it had to have been, I know this was true statistically in a number of ways, but also just in terms of the experience, the aesthetic experience of watching them dominate that Patriots offense. It just was one of the more impressive defensive showings in the Super Bowl I've ever seen. So impressive from a guy who is not only the head coach, but also the defensive play caller. And, that's like a complicated defense. But in the end, it didn't have to, because that line is just so it did, like Devin Witherspoon flying up from the secondary. I was like, and here's the other thing. These thoughts don't have to all be coherent. That's one thing I get the day after the Super Bowl. And also, my relationship with football is so funny, because on the one hand, like, I do still enjoy advanced stats in the football context. Like, I love to hear about DVOA. I especially love to hear about DVOA when DVOA is saying how good the Seahawks are. Well, that's one of my favorite things about DVOA, at least this season. DVOA is like, look, I am going to give you statistical backup for what your human eyes are seeing. And to that, I say, good job, DVOA. But my other thing about football is that it is the sport where I get to be a dipshit if I want. Sorry for the swear. I get to do a swear. My team just won the Super Bowl. Sorry. That of all the swears that I could do, that one's pretty tame. Yeah, right? You're gonna give me that one. You're gonna give me. But I can be a dummy if I want to be, because I don't have a professional stake, even when I am enjoying the Mariners, even when the Mariners were engaged in their playoff run, like, yeah, I was a fan. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't have a fan experience of that, but I also had to have a professional experience of it. I had to apply a writerly, editorial, podcaster lens to that. I don't have to do that for football. I just get to be a dumb girl who loves these football boys. They're all beautiful. They love each other so much. Vibes immaculate. Even though the Seahawks are like, let's bring Chris Pratt around again. Why are you doing that? You don't have to bring Chris Pratt around. No one will miss him. You can set a timer and then you can tell me when I need to be done. Okay. I'm not going to go a whole half hour. You were joking before we got on mic, like, oh, you're just going to talk about the Seahawks for a half hour. I'm not going to talk about them that long.
The hourglass has already run out of sand, but keep going.
I'm going to keep going for a second. I'm going to hit 3 points. The first is an extended Chris Pratt rant. The second is going to be about Sam Darnold. And the third, okay, I'm going to hit 4 points. The third is going to be about Kenneth Walker, the third. And then we're going to talk about special teams. And then I'm going to be done. And I'm going to try to do it quick. Chris Pratt is like from the Northwest and he loves the Seahawks. And we don't have to get into like some of the weirdness of Chris Pratt, but there's weirdness with Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt's a weird guy. He's a strange guy. Some of the ways he's strange, we don't have to talk about. Some of the ways he's strange are like, what happened to your career, man? Like, you were going to do one thing and now you're like now you're doing like weird Tom Clancy knockoff stuff, or like the AI movie. Here's the rant though. When the Seahawks played the Rams on Thursday Night Football, a game I was lucky enough to attend in person, it was one of the most stressful and then transcendent football experiences I've ever had. Prior to that game, they brought out Chris Pratt and let him do promo for that AI movie he's in. And Ben, they made us watch the entire trailer in the stadium. During one of the most important games of their season, we just had to sit there and watch a full-ass trailer for a movie that has been universally panned. Mercy, it's called. You know what the mercy would have been? Not making me watch that trailer. And he's there, he's pumping up the crowd. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, there are a lot of really cool people from Seattle. And there are a lot of less cool people who are cooler than Chris Pratt. And so we had to watch the entire trailer. He got to pump up the crowd. Then they showed us him in his suite, and we were expected to cheer for him. I booed. Rebecca Ferguson was not there, which would have redeemed it because she seems cool. And you know what? I don't understand some of her career choices either, but get your bag, lady. That's fine. I like you. You get a pass on the Weird AI movie, even though, like, what is that Weird AI movie? What are we doing with this Weird AI movie? Anyway, the Seahawks embrace Chris Pratt. He leads the team onto the field doing the promo hype thing prior to the Super Bowl. They decide to operate at that kind of vibes deficit, and they still win. So that's remarkable.
Just goes to show it's not about the bits and the mascots. Ultimately, it's about the team and the talent.
Right, team and the talent. Okay, so that's my Chris Pratt rant. To briefly say something about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had one job in this Super Bowl, which was to not throw a back-breaking pick six to hand the championship to the New England Patriots. He was wonderful in their playoff game against the Rams. The reason they won that game, because the defense has been able to stifle everyone else, still getting kind of undone by the Los Angeles Rams. And let me tell you, to the people who were like, oh, Drake May should have been the MVP. No, you know who I was afraid of? Matthew Stafford. You know who I wasn't afraid of? Drake May. Sam Darnold did exactly what he needed to. He was not good. He was at times terrifying. There were a couple of moments in that game where I was like, oh my God, he's going to throw the pick. He's going to throw the pick right now. He is about to throw the pick. And he didn't end up doing it. So I appreciate you, Sam. The back half of your season was terrifying. You did do what you needed to in the playoffs, sometimes by just not screwing up, sometimes by being tremendous. And I think we have to stop talking about him like he's a Make-A-Wish kid, because the way that people talk about Sam Darnold on broadcasts is understandable but hilarious. They talk about him like he has received a terminal diagnosis. They talk about him to his face and to his teammates like he is the worst quarterback on the planet. And there are times when he plays pretty bad. But also, it is just fundamentally funny that the Super Bowl winning quarterback gets talked about that way. Mm-hmm. Kenneth Walker the third is a hilarious and confounding runner. He is capable of tremendous patience. He had that 130-yard run where it was like he should have just been dead to rights, but he was able to find the little hole. There are times though, and Kenny, I love you. You are a beautiful angel. What a great football guy. But also sometimes you should just run north-south instead of going laterally so much. So there's that. And then finally, I understand why Kenneth Walker the third won Super Bowl MVP. I get it. And there is something like spiritually satisfying, something that serves as like a balm, perhaps a closing of a hellmouth, to have a running back employed by the Seahawks win Super Bowl MVP in a Super Bowl against the Patriots. I think I get to be done watching that Malcolm Butler interception now. That rocks. Oh, what a relief. I was so sick of having to see it. And you know what? It would pop up, Ben, at random moments, like a freaking Jack in the Box from hell. Jack in the Box? It's still Jack in the Box even with the restaurant, right? It's still called Jack in the Box. That's why it's still called it. Okay, so you'd just be like watching a random game that Tom Brady's calling, and then they're showing that. Yeah, and I'm like, why am I getting whacked with this right now? What is happening that I have to see this freaking interception one more time? But now I think I get to be done seeing it. Anyway, really nice to have a Seahawks running back like put the last shovel of dirt on the curse of that Patriots Super Bowl, which like might have opened a portal to hell. And now maybe that's closed? ? But arguably, the Seahawks defense in toto should have won MVP, and they could have figured out who needed the truck, because I imagine the reason they don't do like a unit MVP award is because there is like they get a truck, right? Or a car, or they get something. They get like a check
They
or a
should all
trip
just
to
have to
Disneyland.
pile in there like a clown car.
Yeah, or they could just be like, whose truck, who needs a new truck? You can have that truck. Or who doesn't care about the weird tax implications of this present? Because you do have to pay taxes on it, I imagine. Because it's like the trucks are expensive. And so you can't just like get a truck for free. I think it's like a taxable gift. Anyway, if they weren't going to give it to the defense as a whole, I do think it would have been funny if they had given it to Jason Myers, because he was the first player in NFL history to score 200 points in a season, was responsible for a great many of their points in that Super Bowl game. And it's funny to give it to a kicker, and he does smelling salts. And like now everyone does smelling salts. He's like responsible for a bunch of smelling salts. I don't know if that's good or bad. It might be bad. Is it good or bad, Zeus? It's funny that you're allowed to do smelling salts, Like we have all these rules about PEDs, and he's doing them on the sideline. You kind of like see him doing drugs every game. So that's kind of funny. Anyway, I'm really glad the Seahawks won. It was very stressful until it wasn't. And then it was great. The pick six, I was like, I think they're going to win. I feel comfortable saying it now.
Well, I know you get nervous during these games. I think it was considerate of them to not make it particularly close. I mean, I know the score was kind of close for a while, and the final score
needed to be.
The final score was closer than it ever seemed or felt. But as anxiety in championship games goes, they were so clearly outclassed for much of this game that it probably was a little easier on you than it would have been otherwise. But that was quite a torrent of takes, and I'm happy for you. And I think Mina Kimes should have you on the Mina Kimes show featuring Lenny so that you can continue to talk about this at even greater length. And I talked about some of these topics on Hang Up and Listen, so I will have mercy on the people who are not here for football talk and quarantine my takes to that podcast.
You knew I had to do it, though.
No, you absolutely.
You knew I had to do it.
People want to hear your raw, uncut fan energy, which we don't get to hear very often for Mariners-related reasons.
Right.
So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you for giving me the space to do that, especially the Chris Pratt stuff, because it's really been weighing on me. I just there are a lot of cool people from Seattle. Are they all busy? Like they could have had, there were so many Mariners at the Super Bowl. There were all kinds of Mariners at the Super Bowl, just like guys and guys and guys. Cal was there, and Julio was there, and Brian Wu was there, and George Kirby was there, and Josh Naylor was there. Josh Naylor is having the best couple of months of his entire life, and I am enjoying it on his behalf. Like he's just like, look, I'm going to be the guy who shows up to all the sports in the city where I now have a long deal, and I'm going to be having a great time. They could have had any of those guys do it, although maybe they would it have been worse from a vibe? Sorry, I'm going to be done. Would it have been worse from a vibes perspective to have a member of the Mariners lead them out? I submit that it would not.
Question. No, maybe not. Yeah.
Like, maybe
well,
not.
That's what I wanted to ask you. I know this is not the first Seahawks Super Bowl you've seen, but they're all sweet. The second one is sweet as well.
Oh, yeah, it feels great.
Does this make you more or less eager to see a Mariners title? And maybe it has no effect because that's a 10 in terms of your desire regardless. But is it a pressure release valve? Hey, okay, I got to express these feelings and I got to feel all these emotions and got to experience a championship. Or does it ramp up the pressure further because you're thinking, ooh, I get to enjoy this for my football team, but imagine if I got to feel this for my baseball team too, and that would be even more special and different in some ways. And I want this now that I've experienced this multiple times for my football team. It just makes me crave it for my baseball team even more, because I wonder about that when you're in a multi-sport city and one team has more success than another. Is it just like I'm sated? Okay, this helps. My angst is somewhat depleted just because my joy was renewed by this other team, or does it make the contrast even stronger? They're
really discrete experiences. I can't really feel anything but like awe at the the year Seattle sports had, and not every team did the thing. And the Mariners didn't do the thing ultimately, but like, what a tremendous time. What a run, and like the Mariners season extending so far into the Seahawks season, and then the Seahawks season extending all the way up to pitchers and catchers, basically. Then an embarrassment of riches. My sister sent me a video of my nieces reacting to the win last night, and I just was like, these girls are going to have a totally warped understanding of what it's like to be a Seattle sports fan. That's wild.
Yeah, true.
Like we were just, with exceptions, right? Like I think that you would be remiss to say like it was all bad, because we got to watch this incredible era of Storm basketball, which was so gratifying, and they were so good, and it had such important, great athletes. And I know that people care about soccer, and I'm not one of those people, but I don't want to diminish their enjoyment. But when it came to like the men's sports, it was just like wandering in the wilderness for such a long time. And now these girls are going to be like, our sports are great. And I'm going to be like, you don't know what it's like. I'm going to turn into an old person. More than I am. So I experience them differently, and in total just feel like I feel so fortunate to have witnessed such a good run here about teams I care about. I like it that like the Mariners guy, so many of the Mariners guys were there, because it's like, hey,
like that cross-sport pollination. It's nice. If
I were a pro athlete, it would be my favorite thing about being a pro athlete, I think, would be like getting to be, hey, I'm going to show up at this other thing, and everyone's going to be excited to see me, and I'm going to be so happy for these folks, and they're going to be excited for me, and like it would be great. So anyway, I view them separately. I remain hopeful that like the Mariners will win a World Series, because it would just mean so much to so many. It would mean a lot to me, but it would also just mean so much to so many people I know, and I would find that very gratifying. But I don't. It doesn't feel like a competition. It can only really feel complimentary to me, because there's clearly, I'm going to stop talking. I'm talking so much. This isn't even like when you made me record a voice memo after that one game, and I was like clearly kind of drunk. It's like it's 12:41 on a Monday. I've been working for like 6 hours. So
it's the Super Bowl afterglow.
It's so exciting.
Afternoon after. Yeah.
But so I just view it as they're like reinforcing and complementary experiences. And I also just think it goes to show that like, I don't think there's a cap on like the amount of excitement you can have in a place for like sports going good. People like it when their sports folks do well. They want to see all their beautiful sports folks doing well. My greatest issue today has been that I have been busy editing all morning, and then we've been recording, which has been gratifying because we've had really good preview conversations, which we'll talk about in a second. But I just haven't been able to listen to any of my podcasts about my beautiful football guys, Ben. I have some like administrative work I have to do today, like stuff that I don't have to edit for. And I think I'm going to move it up in the queue, not irresponsibly. It's fine. Just so I can listen to people talk about my football guys, including Mina. Can't wait to hear what Mina has to say. Thank you, Mina, for recording right after the Super Bowl. I was like, I'm going to have that in my
I'm
queue.
Sure you're dying to hear my Super Bowl analysis on Hang Up and Listen, so that'll be there for you too. But great team, great title.
Thank you.
Not great uniforms in my mind. I hesitate to even say that because it might spur. But,
what about them?
I'm not a big uniform person, so it's not a big deal. I just, aesthetically speaking, not my favorite. But
do you like the throwbacks?
Yeah, I think so. Which I was going to say, because the Marlins bringing back the mid-'90s teal for their throwbacks now. I love it. That got me going, even as someone who's basically a non-uniform carer. Yes. That should just be their permanent uniforms as far as I'm concerned. Why mess with perfection? But
right. And the NFL has like rules about like how many you can do and how many times. And it feels so strange and inscrutable to me. And I know that what they want to do is force the like whether it's color rush or rivalry or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're really telling me, NFL, that you would rather see those University of Oregon ass jerseys that you made the Seahawks wear? They were bad, Ben. They were bad. That was the other thing at that Thursday night game that contributed to the rancid vibes that they somehow overcame, is that I'm pretty sure they were wearing their rivalry uniforms that night, and they're not good. And they also they look strongly like University of Oregon uniforms, which, like, there are a lot of Oregon grads in Seattle, and I don't bear them any ill will, really, but, like, it's a weird choice when you're a Seattle-based team. So anyway, they should wear the throwbacks all the time, because the throwbacks are immaculate. They are beautiful. I do wish they had gone navy pants, white tops, because that's what they did when they won against the Broncos. And I like that uniform combo, I think, the best. I don't mind the navy. I know that apparently people don't like them. And maybe I'm just still scarred by, like, the Sean Alexander era uniforms, which were trash. They were so bad. That was a low point in, like, uniform technology, kind of across sports, I would submit.
Yeah. One thing I do appreciate, though, is the nickname. And I think football does this better than baseball. Baseball has team nicknames, or it did before the decline of nicknames, if there is a decline of nicknames. You got the Gas House Gang and the Whiz Kids and the Miracle Mets and so forth. Actually, when I tried to type in Gas House Gang, Google tried to autocorrect that to Gaseous Gang, which would be very different. But you have the team level.
Like, they're a gang full of people who have gas?
Yes. So you have team level nicknames, but you don't really have nicknames for units, for components of teams, which obviously is a huge thing with the Seahawks, with the Legion of Boom, and with the Dark Side defense and everything. And I tried to make this a thing with the Royals, the 2014 Royals in their ultimate outfield when they would put in Gerard Dyson for defense. Yeah. That didn't really catch on. I think it's because baseball is an individual sport masquerading as a team sport. So having nicknames for
the Bomba Squad.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, you have, the Nasty Boys or Murderers Row, right? Like, there's some history of it, but it's not as common.
Yeah.
And I think it makes sense for it not to be as common, just because you tend not to think of a defense as a unit, because they're not really working in tandem so much unless you're a double play combo or something in baseball. It's not quite like a defense in football, for instance. So I do lament the lack of that in baseball, and I think we should try to make more of it. And so I appreciate it in the Seahawks case. Although my only quibble with Legion of Boom is basically that Legion of Doom is already the name of, like, a intimidating unit. And so changing it to Boom doesn't actually make it more scary or imposing.
But it's more descriptive, because they brought
it's more descriptive. It's true.
It's more descriptive. I mean, like, look, okay, so now I'm going to briefly talk about that era of Seahawks. I'm going to be honest, I swear to God.
I was joking about half an hour on the Seahawks, I swear.
So, like, I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done. Oh, it really has been half an hour. Look, how many times is this going to happen on the pod, right? Not very many.
Not often.
Not very often.
We'll timestamp it. Timestamps are your friend sometimes.
The Legion of Boom, it was so descriptive, because, like, there are games, it's very easy to identify when in time that team played based on the way that they hit, the way that Cam Chancellor in particular hit, because they're not allowed to hit like that anymore, which is, to be clear, a good thing. Like, this is not me being like, oh, back in the day, you could give guys a concussion and it was fine. No. Like, I saw Cam Chancellor deliver hits to members of the San Francisco 49ers and then feel quite confident that they did not know their names anymore, right? And that's bad. That's bad for them as people. But it was very it was descriptive, because they brought the boom. Just ask Vernon Davis. Like, anyway, okay.
All right. Well, the good news, I guess, maybe, is that we don't have a huge amount of baseball banter for you today, because we have two previews, and we will be bringing you a Pirates preview from John Perrotto and a Twins preview from Aaron Gleeman. So we will get to that shortly. I just wanted to wish you condolences on the retirement of Buck Martinez. And I'm glad that the Seahawks won, just to distract you from the loss in baseball of Buck, because I know that he is just one of your favorite characters in the game.
Is.
You're not even a Blue Jays fan, just the voice, the presence, and we will always have recorded Buck Martinez, and future generations will marvel at the fact that he existed and that talking for a living was his job, as it should have been. And I don't know if it was just that they couldn't let him attempt to say Cam Schlittler anymore on mic or what. But, sad to see him go. Obviously, he's had a lot of health issues in recent years and multiple kinds of cancer. I hope that he is healthy and fine and just wants to enjoy his retirement. Yeah. There was one ominous note in his retirement announcement where he said, I had hoped to be part of the 50th year of the Toronto Blue Jays. I hope he will be part of it in some context, but obviously a legend for the franchise as a player, as a manager, as a broadcaster. He's been around for half a century, and he is indeed inimitable. And I'm sorry that, future players will not have their names pronounced by Buck Martinez. I was almost going to say, as much as I find the whole re-speecherization of everything, the AI-ification of voices distasteful, I was going to say I'd make an exception for Buck if he greenlit it and was just like, you can just, if you can use my voice just so that we continue to be treated to how it would sound if Buck Martinez said something when he's no longer broadcasting. But it wouldn't be the same, because you wouldn't be able to AI-ify his mispronunciations. And I don't think you could project it, really. You couldn't really extrapolate from the corpus of Buck Martinez's work, because it's just so singular, the human touch. So Buck's the best. He'll be missed on mic for sure.
I don't think AI could replicate the sound of like vowels being simultaneously chewed and swallowed, which is like a lot of the Buck.
Yeah, he might just break the model. Maybe that's how it's like the Luddite
He can defeat
uprising.
The machines.
Yeah, we just here, see what you can do with this LLM. See if you can generate a Buck Martinez facsimile. Good luck. Yeah.
I hope that he is well. And even if he is completely well, and this is not in response to like any kind of health setback, like, you get to be done at a certain point, you get to enjoy time with your family. And it is even, with the constraints that his health has put on his schedule in the last couple of years, like a grueling thing to do, regardless of your age, and maybe particularly so when you're getting up in years. So I hope that Buck is well. I hope that Buck gets to enjoy a lovely retirement. I'm sure that he is welcome back in that booth whenever he feels like dropping by. But it will not be the same. I'm not even doing justice to it. Like, I'm not really in the voice, but but who could be? It's so
right.
It is unique. It is truly unique.
Yeah.
Truly unique. I just did a thing I hate when people try to modify unique, but it you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we'll make an exception for Buck. And even sadder news and a bigger loss. Yeah, the untimely death of Terrance Gore, which that just kind of came out of nowhere and hit people hard. Terrance Gore, a former guest on this podcast during the Jeff Sullivan era, was a delightful conversation with him on episode 1306. And sad on a human level. He was a young guy. He was 34. He had a family and kids and everything. And it was just seemingly complications from a non-life-threatening surgery. And things just went wrong. And there have been some nice remembrances in recent days, and just a special player. I mean, really kind of the baseball equivalent to a special teams player, right? That's kind of what he was. And to invoke the mid-2010s Royals again, as I just did, he was a big part of those teams. Obviously has 3 World Series rings, but was the most integral component of those teams, more so than the later ones that he contributed to. And it was just so much fun to see him do that, to be the playoff pinch runner extraordinaire, and obviously a limited player, but the times when you needed him and when he could give you that stolen base, it was just so much fun and kind of a throwback. Every generation or two, there's a player like that. And people think of course, the A's under Charlie Finley and all of their sprinter extraordinaires and everything. But it was a special career, and talk about good vibes guy. Obviously, he was one of those, and, ever smiling. Andy McCullough did a nice piece on him for The Athletic. Of course, Andy covered him with the Royals as well. So, it's really sad in a baseball sense, also in a just human sense. Rest in peace, Terrance Gore.
Yeah, we hope your family's well supported in a really sad time. So,
yes. Yeah, there was a piece that was written at Baseball Prospectus just in November by another former guest of ours, Bradley Woodrum, about the heir to Terrance Gore. And Bradley was trying to figure out, is there anyone who fits that profile or who could be coming along, who could occupy that sort of spot on a roster? And it's pretty hard to come up with candidates because there just aren't a lot of guys who had that combination of tools, and some extremely amazing tools and some missing tools, and just the absolute burner that he was. Came up with Kendall George as the best candidate. Kendall George, who's a Dodgers prospect and stole 100 bases in the minors, and might have some deficiencies in other areas. He might turn out to be too good to play that part, but that was who Bradley identified. I'll link to his piece on the search for someone who could be Gore-like on the field. But by all accounts, great guy and a really fun player who just really made more of an impact than you could ever glean from his WAR or whatever, because no one who was following baseball during the Terrance Gore years will ever forget Terrance Gore. And he will be invoked as an archetype of that type of player. If other players like that come along, people will think immediately of Terrance Gore. So he made a major impact. And the last thing I will say, I saw this stray tweet, and it's mildly Pirates related. It was about this kid named Sebastian Perez, and it was, okay, I'll just read it. It's a little clip of this guy hitting, and the tweet, which is from someone named Wilbur Sanchez. The account is @WilburData, and it says, "The Pirates have lost Sebastian Perez, the top catcher in the 2027 class." So this is an international prospect. Okay. And according to many scouts, the best catcher in the history of the international class. Perez combines Judge-like power, Ellie De La Cruz's speed, and Yadier Molina's defense. It is very likely that Sebastian's new deal will be worth at least double his previous agreement. So again, don't place any undue expectations on the kid.
Yeah,
Judge-like power, Ellie's speed, and Yadier Molina's defense. Now, a number of things about this. I mean, first of all, the idea that this kid who must be, 15 or something.
Right, because he's a 2027 signee.
Yeah. The idea that the Pirates could have lost him, that anyone could have lost him, that anyone could have had a deal with him in the first place. I know that this is how it works, but I always just feel the need to point out, none of these people are supposed to have deals with anyone. These teams are not actually supposed to sign anyone at this age. But that's just kind of par for the course, I guess. And I asked Eric Longenhagen about this player because I knew nothing about him, obviously. And Eric texted a couple of, he said, director level people. And one response he got back was, best catcher in history, or best catcher in the history of the international market is insane. So this appears to be blowing some smoke, some hot air here. I mean, how could it not be? Because even if he really was the best catching prospect there's
no way you could know that now.
Yeah. And also, to place that sort of expectation on a kid, Judge-like power, Ellie De La Cruz's speed, and Yadier Molina's defense. What, 15-year-old has Yadier Molina's defense anyway? What would that even look like?
What would it look like?
I was trying to figure out what a player with that combination of skills would be worth, or what? Can you imagine? Judge-like power, Ellie's speed, and Yadier Molina's defense. Now, I guess Judge-like power and Ellie's speed could be O'Neal Cruz, who we're about to talk to John Perrotto about, and he's not actually a very good player at this point.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there's an unsaid, like, actualized there, right?
Yeah,
like,
probably, right. It's not just that he can hit the ball as hard or as far as Judge, but that I guess he can hit it more regularly than O'Neal Cruz does, right? Or he has some plate judgment, etc. So if you had someone who had Judge's offense, let's say, and Ellie's speed, so Ellie just, being the base runner and base stealer that he is, and what Judge does at the plate with Yadier Molina's defense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, that would be a pretty special player. Yeah, it's too bad the Pirates lost him because he sure could have helped him.
How much more valuable is that guy than, like, Cal Raleigh was last year?
Yeah, like a lot, probably, right? Because
Cal, I think you can put, like, there's maybe a grade or two of power difference between the two, but, like, of the catchers working today, if you wanted to put a power comp on an active catcher, that's probably who you'd point to, right? Is Cal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and he's not a bad defender, but he's probably not. Yeah, it's just like you're looking at a guy who's like a win or two more valuable than that seems bonkers. That seems a little goofy to me.
Yes, it certainly is. But if you had, and base running, base stealing, it's not worth as much as you'd kind of like it to be. But
sure.
But with Ellie, he was worth about a win, just pure base running this past season. So add that on top of everything, in addition to if you gave Judge Ellie's speed, then not only is he going to be crushing everything, but also he's going to be beating out just routine grounders and stuff. Like Ellie is, I guess, the second most valuable base runner last year after Corbin Carroll. So yeah, give Judge that sort of speed and then also put him behind the plate and make him one of the best defenders at that premium position. You're talking, if Judge as it is a 10-win player.
Right.
And then you're adding to his offense, let's say, give him a couple wins for beating out hits and stealing tons of bases.
Right.
And then you're giving him the catcher positional adjustment.
Right.
And
with good
an elite
defense.
catcher. Yeah. You're talking about maybe a 20-WAR player. I mean, move over Babe Ruth at this point.
Yeah, get out of the way.
Yeah, this guy's going to be the best player ever. So,
wow. Yeah,
remember
Pirates
that name
might regret not signing
or don't.
him,
Yeah, it reminds me of when the scout said that Luis Robert Jr. was the best player in the world, whenever that was, before he made his pro debut in the U.S. And we were wait, he's better than Mike Trout, like right now?
Right.
No, he turned out to be a pretty good player. But let's wait 10 years or so and see whether Sebastian Perez turned out to be the best player of all time. Or maybe it won't take him 10 years because he has Judge's power and Ellie De La Cruz's speed and Yadier Molina's defense, and so precocious and at such a young age. So it might just be a few years, wherever he ends up, that we will be seeing him become the best player ever. But that is a ridiculous tweet, no matter how talented this player is. But I don't think Pirates fans necessarily need to lament that they just lost the best player in baseball. They can be excited about the great players they have, such as Paul Skeens and Connor Griffin, who actually deserves to be quite hyped and is on the verge of being in the big leagues, which we are about to talk to John Perrotto about. We'll be back with him in just a second, followed by Aaron Gleeman on the Twins. Oh, and I should say that there have been a bunch of transactions, but the nice thing about transactions happening, like a little flurry of transactions happening as pitchers and catchers are reporting, is that we can save them for the previews.
I know.
It's nice. We don't have to banter about the Pirates signing Marcell Ozuna because, hey, Pirates preview today. How about that? We don't really have to talk about Paul Goldschmidt re-signing with the Yankees because we'll get to that when we do the Yankees preview. We don't have to talk about the Caleb Durbin trade, although that is kind of an interesting trade because we're talking Brewers this week and Red Sox next week. We'll get to it. So we will cover all of that just in the course of our previews. And happy pitchers and catchers report week to everyone, because I know that even if people aren't big football fans, they do have some reason to celebrate the end of football, namely that it marks the about to be beginning of baseball, sort of, technically. All right, we'll be right back.
Romantic, pedantic, and hypothetical, semantic and frantic, real or theoretical. They give you the stats and they give you the news. It's a baseball podcast you should choose. Effectively wise
subjectively styled. Let's play ball. It's effectively wild. It's effectively wild. It's effectively wild.
All right, it's time to talk about one of the more active teams of the winter, though perhaps not as active as its fans were hoping. One of the more intriguing teams, certainly. And to do that, we are joined by John Perrotto, who's been covering the team as long as anyone. The mystery team, by the way, is the Pittsburgh Pirates. John covers them for Roundtable Sports, also writes about the Pirates and baseball for Yardbarker, USA Today, and other outlets. John, good to have you back.
Good to be with you, too. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, our pleasure. So the Pirates are poised at an interesting place. According to the FanGraphs projections, they're at 81.6 wins, which would certainly be an uptick. They're poised on the precipice of a winning record, perhaps, but fans wanted them to be busy this offseason, and they certainly talked a big game at the start of the offseason about spending, and we heard various reports and rumors about how much they were primed to spend, and they tried to get this guy or that guy. How do you feel about their level of aggressiveness and spending relative to what they led people to believe might happen and relative to what they needed to do?
Well, I was never very on board that they were going to get Kyle Schwarber, even here in the last few days, Framber Valdez. I think they talked a good game there. I think they kind of leaked some things to some of the national writers to try to change the perception of the Pirates around the country, especially the cheap ownership. But in fairness, they've done more this winter than they have done in quite a few winters.
Low bar, but yeah.
I mean, which is, they actually signed people that fans have heard of, other than, the very hardcore fans that know who the utility players are in Double-A. But I like what they've done. I'd like it a little more if they would have added one more really, really good player. But I do think their offense has certainly got to be improved. It couldn't be any worse than last year. They've added 3 bats, and they've added a couple of hard-throwing left-handed relievers, which they needed. So, I mean, Ben Cherington's gone out, and he's been allowed to spend a little money this time, and I think he spent it pretty wisely, considering what he had on hand. It's not like he had a couple $100 million. I mean, what he did have, I certainly think he's improved the team. Whether it's good enough to contend, maybe. We'll see.
I'm curious sort of what the thinking is in terms of how much more they might have to overspend if there is a guy who they really want in order to sort of make up for the perceived competitiveness deficit here, right? Because they were linked to a number of other guys, some of whom were higher profile than the players who they ultimately ended up bringing in. And we have seen franchises in the past who, when they're sort of on the edge of a real playoff-worthy record, having to overcommit resources to say, no, really come here and we're gonna go win some baseball games. So do you think that there was any more room to maneuver here than what they were ultimately able to do?
I don't really think. I think a guy like Kyle Schwarber, they were going to have to go way past what the Phillies gave him at $150 million for 5 years. I think for him to take a gamble, to come to a franchise that's had 29 losing seasons in the last 33 years and hasn't won a division title since '92, I think you're going to have to overpay and overpay steeply to get a star type player, and they just the thing is, once players get here, they actually like it. I mean, the ballpark's beautiful. It's a good city, and it's a good place to live. It's a good place to work. But eventually, you want to win, and this isn't the place to win, and that's why they have a hard time attracting free agents. Is because of the fact that they have a history here over the last 3+ decades of being pretty dreadful. So to get a free agent, Meg, a couple things have to happen. Either one, you're going to have to really overpay, or two, maybe you have somebody who has some kind of connection to Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania or in this area where they want to come home and want to play in their hometown or their home region. But other than that, if you're going to get a good player, you have to overpay or just wait out the market for bargains at the end.
Well, let's talk about one of the guys who they were able to bring in, and I don't know that I'd describe it as a bargain, as more of a fair contract. So they signed O'Hearn for 2 years and $29 million, and he's an interesting fit for them because this last season was really the first time that he has been largely platoon neutral. How are they thinking about deploying him, and what about his bat was so attractive to them?
I think originally they wanted him to be the primary DH, but now that they agreed to terms this morning with Marcell Ozuna, who hasn't played in the field at all the last 2 seasons, it would seem to me that Ozuna is going to be the DH. And I think they'll play O'Hearn in right field, which is easier to play at PNC Park than left field, which has the spacious left center gap. I believe they'll move Brian Reynolds back over to left field from right field. And I think O'Hearn's a guy who did want to be here. I mean, you get the feeling a lot of time when guys sign here, they got to say the right thing. They don't want to come in and go, well, I had no other options, so I signed with Pittsburgh. But, I mean, he seemed genuinely excited, and he wanted to be here. And I get the feeling, he had offers from other teams that may be better than the Pirates, and he thought they had a chance to win here. But I think certainly, he gives them a good professional hitter in the middle of the lineup. Maybe his home runs go up a little bit. I know he's only hit 16 or 17, his career high. But maybe here in this ballpark, which plays well for lefties with his short porch and right, maybe he boosts his home run total up to 25 this year. But certainly it's a good fit for O'Hearn. He's excited to be here, and I think he's going to have a good year and be a good player for the Pirates.
Adding Ozuna on a 1-year deal seemingly closes the book on Andrew McCutchen's career with the Pirates, if it wasn't closed already. Of course, that's become a controversy in recent weeks, which we talked about after he was not invited to the Fan Fest and expressed some thoughts about that, and also not being asked back as a player. So how do you feel about how they handled their parting with him and just the idea of parting with him in the first place?
Well, I don't see where he fits on the roster, and I wasn't even so sure before today's news of Ozuna if he really even fit on the roster. It could have been handled better. I think the irony of this is McCutchen came back here because he wanted to be part of making the Pirates winners again. And their chances of winning are better now without him on the roster than with him on the roster. And, he's an icon here. He lives in Pittsburgh. He married a woman from Pittsburgh. They have 5 children. They're raising him up in the northern suburbs about 10 miles from the ballpark. He's beloved here. I mean, he was the guy that turned the franchise around in the mid-2010s when they went to the wild card game 3 years in a row. I just think the Pirates didn't know when the offseason began if he really fit in their plans or not. And I think they probably should have communicated it to him better than they did. It's an unfortunate situation. Obviously, McCutchen is hurt. He has not spoken to the media, but, by going by what he's put on social media. And it is an awkward goodbye to someone who, again, probably not a Hall of Fame player, but certainly in the realm of the Pirates, probably someone that will have his number retired someday. So, yeah, it's a tough one. And I just think, I think Kutch kind of got a little whiny at the end, going to the owner and going over to the general manager's head. And I also think Ben Cherington could have handled a little better. But people skills not necessarily Ben's forte. He's a good guy, but he's very kind of bashful.
And obviously the free agent signings were not their only additions for whatever role they may have played in ending McCutchen's tenure. They also brought guys in on the trade market. Brandon Lau is now part of the team. They got the password from Boston. Cenk Mangum is here. So talk to us about, maybe let's start with Lau and then some of the other reinforcements they brought in as sort of complementary pieces here.
They made a 3-way trade with Tampa Bay and Houston. They sent Mike Burrows, who's a pitcher, a fairly promising young pitcher. It had a solid rookie season last year, to Houston, and then Tampa Bay got involved, and the Pirates got 3 players from Tampa Bay. I think Brandon Lyle will certainly help the Pirates this year. Is, again, another left-handed hitter that should benefit from playing in PNC Park. But the Pirates also got a couple of other useful players, maybe not big impact players, but pieces that could help them. They got Mason Montgomery, a left-handed reliever who throws 100 miles an hour, and he had a pretty good rookie year with the Rays last year, and he'll certainly slot into the bullpen. And another guy, he's older, he didn't make it to the big leagues until last year when he was 29, is Jake Mangum, a switch-hitting outfielder who I don't think he's an everyday player, and I don't think he will be now that they've added Osuna. But certainly I think he could be a good fourth outfielder. He plays pretty good defense at all three outfield spots. He doesn't have a whole lot of power, but he is a good contact hitter. He doesn't strike out much, but he also doesn't walk much. But he did steal 27 bases last year, and this is a team that could use a little speed. And I think Mangum will be a nice little part-time player for the Pirates. And they also got Gregory Soto as a free agent. And so now they have two lefties, Montgomery and Soto, who throw 100 miles an hour. So they've got some pretty decent players back. Maybe not the big headline. They didn't get Kyle Schwarber. They didn't get Framber Valdez. But they did add some players, and they're certainly better than, on paper at least, than they were last year. I think they're a little deeper. I think they're a little more talented.
Well, they'd also like to get some more offense out of returning players, and maybe first and foremost among them might be O'Neal Cruz, who continues to be a StatCast star who will wow you on particular plays, but the complete package, when you look at it, is a below-average batter and maybe at best an average player, strikes out a lot. The defensive metrics are quite divided on him. Defensive run saved says he was a disaster in center field. StatCast says he was an asset out there. So I'd be curious about your evaluation of him and how the defensive transition has gone and how you think the team views that, because there was some idea that maybe this would just be a stop along the way to an outfield corner. And then what, if anything, can they do to harness that power more effectively?
I would tend to agree with defensive runs saved. I thought he was a disaster out there, and I really respect, I guess is the word I want to say, StatCast, but I don't know where they were coming from with their metric on Cruz. For one thing, I don't think he wants to be out there. I think he's still mad that they moved him off shortstop, even though he doesn't say anything publicly. I think he felt that he could be a big league shortstop, and he took a lot of pride in it. He's just not a very instinctive player, Ben. I mean, it's as simple as that. If we took O'Neal Cruz, the three of us, if we took him to a tryout camp, every scout at that tryout camp would go crazy with all the tools that he has. He can hit for power. He runs. He has great exit velocity. He's fast. He's got as strong his arm as anybody in the league. But he just doesn't have the instincts of a baseball player. And the thing that kind of bothers me now is he's been in the league for a few years. It's not like he's a rookie or even a second year. And this is a really pivotal year for him. He's 27 years old now. He's not young anymore. He's certainly not old at 27. He's got to show something. I mean, he has got to put things together. I think the ship has sailed that he'll be like the best player in baseball, like some people thought he might be, because he's that talented, or certainly maybe in the top three. I still think he can be an above average player, but he just doesn't grasp the finer points of the game, and it just hurts him over and over again. And the sad part is he never seems to ever pick up on anything, and if anything, it gets worse sometimes.
Is there anyone else in the lineup on the bench whom you would forecast improvement from? Is it maybe Spencer Horwitz, who was injured at the start of last season? Could he play more? Could he play even better? Is there anyone else who's hanging around here who you think there might be more in the bat?
Well, I think they need to get Brian Reynolds back to his normal, 25 home run, 280 batting average, close to 800 OPS type form. He really had a bad year last year, and it kind of went unnoticed. But, if you look at him the previous four seasons, he was really a metronome. His statistics were almost identical in all 4 seasons. He's a guy you could really count on. He's been to a couple All-Star games, and he's not a superstar, but certainly when he produces like he did the previous 4 years, he's an asset to the lineup. And I'll be curious to see, too, with the Pirates, Horwitz, as you mentioned. I thought he had a good year. He was hurt early. He had wrist surgery right before spring training. He didn't get back into the lineup until late May, and he really struggled to get his timing back, and he really hit his stride into July, right around the All-Star break. I liked him. I think he's a good hitter. He doesn't have as much power as maybe you wish a first baseman would have, but he is a good hitter. He's a good situational hitter. He's makes pretty consistent contact. Has a good eye. He'll take a walk. I think he'll help. I'll be curious of Joey Bart. I want to see which Joey Bart shows up this year. He was the guy who was a revelation 2 years ago. It looked like, he'd been a big bust in San Francisco. The Pirates got him on a waiver trade, and he hit 14 home runs and had a good year. Not a great defensive catcher, but made up for his offense. Last year, he hit 4 home runs, and he doesn't have a lot of value as a catcher if he's only hitting 4 home runs. So, they need more the 2024 Joey Bart. And also then there's always the case of Henry Davis, the other catcher, and Henry who hitting 165. That's not going to cut it. And it's funny how the perception of him was when his Pirates took him first overall in the 2021 draft. It was like, he's a bat-first player. He's going to hit in the big leagues. There's no doubt. But is he going to be able to be a catcher? Are they going to have to move him to the outfield or first base? Well, now it turns out he's an excellent defensive catcher. He's by far better than Joey Bart. All the pitchers love to throw to him. They all love working with him, but he can't hit a lick. So, those are some of the guys right off the top of my head that I'm kind of curious to see how they do this year. And also Jared Triolo at third base, if they don't acquire a third baseman. He's a very good defensive third baseman. I mean, probably one step below Ke'Bryan Hayes or a half step below. He can really play third base. He's been erratic hitting-wise in his 3 years in the big leagues, though. They did send him down at the All-Star break for 2 or 3 weeks to AAA last year. And he did come back, and he hit better the last 2 months of the season. So if he can even be like a league average hitter with his defense at third base, I think he will be an asset.
I can't believe that we've gotten almost 20 minutes into this preview and we haven't yet talked about Paul Skeens, which I suppose makes some amount of sense. What more is there really to say about him at this point? But
trying to end on an up note. We're starting with the downers, and then we'll talk about the pitching.
Well, but I am curious, Ben and I have had the chance to talk to Skeens ourselves, and I think we were both struck by like how thoughtful a guy he is, how considered his craft seems to be, and how open to adapting and changing and improving an already very impressive repertoire he is. So I'm curious if there's anything that you see as sort of a next step for him. Again, kind of hard to imagine given the season that he just had, but what are his developmental goals at this point? And what are you expecting from him in 2026?
It's kind of hard to get better than he is. I mean, he had that rookie season for the ages 2 years ago, and then he came back and had another great season last year. He really had no drop-off. I think the biggest thing is, will the league adjust back to him? And I'm not so sure they will for 2 reasons. One, he's very, very good, and I don't know if too many people are ever going to adjust to him. And 2, is he's not satisfied just with how he is now. He wants to be better. I mean, he wants to improve his pitches. He wants to keep his sequencing, to keep hitters off guard. He wants to study the hitters more. And, I will say this for Paul is he is a hard worker. Obviously he has a lot of natural talent, but he puts in the time. He really cares. He's one of the first guys in the clubhouse every day, one of the last to leave. He studies the game. He he talks to all the other pitchers about how they attack hitters. And I mean, he's a real student of the game. And he's also just a very intelligent guy. I mean, he went to the Air Force Academy for 2 years before he transferred to LSU. And he's just, he's almost too good to be true. The one thing I worried about with him, and I know it's not a baseball thing, but, he has the celebrity relationship with Livy Dunn. And I thought maybe that might cause him to lose a little focus and maybe get caught up more in being a celebrity than a ball player. But he does a remarkable job of separating his private life and his professional life. And even though he's in the spotlight more than almost any player in the big leagues, he has not let that get to him at all. He has not become a celebrity. He's still Paul Skeens, just a ball player, and that's refreshing to see.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he seems like the most enthusiastic participant in the spotlight.
No. I get the feeling he's one of those guys, when the camera's off of him, he rolls his eyes.
Yeah, and he definitely doesn't look any different when the camera's on or act any different. But it's kind of endearing in a way. But as good as Paul Skeens is, he does not make a rotation by himself. He needs some help. He needs some sidekicks, and there are some candidates to be able sidekicks for him. In addition to Mitch Keller, maybe we can talk about some of the younger guys, and maybe we can start with Jared Jones, who was such a sensation early in his rookie year. And of course, he missed all of last season. He had internal brace surgery. So A, when might he be back? Will there be any restrictions? And B, I guess, are the Pirates hoping that he will be the guy he was in that first trip around the league, or the guy who lost a little effectiveness as the league started to see him, or as he fatigued or whatever it was a little later in that year?
Well, they're hopeful he comes back being pretty much the same guy he was when he first came into the big leagues at the beginning of the 24 season. But he's coming along well. He was at the Pirate Fan Fest here a couple weeks ago, and he was very upbeat. He said that he's feeling good. There's been no real hiccups in his rehab, and he's hoping maybe by May. I think the Pirates are being a little more conservative, probably be June or July before he comes back in the big leagues. The one thing that worries me about him is he's not a very big guy. He's not very physical, and he has a very violent delivery. And I wonder, as good as he is, as talented as he is, if he might be better served in the long term as a reliever, where he can just go 1 or 2 innings and not put as much stress and pressure on his arm. But he's an interesting guy. He's got a lot of self-confidence, but he was able to back it up for the most part as a rookie.
Of course, the young, impressive pitchers don't end there. I want to ask about Braxton Ashcraft and Bubba Chandler and sort of what your expectations are for them this year. And maybe we can start with Chandler and how you expect that he'll be deployed, because obviously when he came up late last season, got some starts, but also some relief work. I know there was a bit of gnashing of teeth about his deployment there. So talk to us about Chandler and Ashcraft.
Yeah, I think what they tried to do with both of those is kind of give them soft landings in the big leagues. Used them out of the bullpen a little and used them as openers and just different ways to kind of acclimate them into the big leagues. And I thought both did well. I like them both a lot. I think, Chandler obviously gets more publicity. He's a top 15, top 20 prospect. Some people will say he's one of the, top, maybe the top pitching prospect in baseball, or certainly in the top 3. And he's good. But I'm telling you, in my mind, Braxton Ashcraft is just as good as Chandler. He doesn't get the hype. He doesn't get the prospect recognition. But he was really impressive last year. His stuff is good. He throws strikes. He doesn't beat himself by walking people or a lack of command, which is rare for a pitcher, a young pitcher like that. And he also is not fazed by being in the big leagues. He's really calm, and he's really steady for a young guy. Bubba is a little more excitable, but he's very good too. He has great stuff too. And I think both of them, they're going to be regular starters this year. Now, they may get the occasional time they get skipped through the rotation to manage their workload or anything, but I don't think there's going to be any major limitations on either pitcher this year. I think, the days of coming in bulk relief are over. I think they're going to be part of the rotation with Skeens and Keller and either like Jose Urquidy or Mike Clevenger or Hunter Barco, whoever ends up winning the fifth spot. But I like them both a lot. I like Chandler, but I think Ashcraft's right there with him. And I don't know if a lot of other people around baseball realize how good Ashcraft is, too.
Yeah, it's a really exciting prospect. If they can get all those guys together in the rotation at one time and keep them healthy and just go Skeens, Chandler, Ashcraft, Jones, Keller, just an all homegrown, all Pirates drafted rotation. Whew. I mean, that's exciting. That makes you wish that they had gone out and gotten even bigger bats to support those guys. But if that works out, now they just barely cracked the top 10 in projected WAR from starting pitchers, which has to do with some of the uncertainty about how many innings they'll get from those guys and then what the depth is behind them. And I guess that's an issue, right? Because everyone eventually has to dip into their 6th, 7th, 8th, maybe beyond that starters. And it kind of gets thin beyond that top 5 for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, they traded Johan Oviedo and they traded Mike Burrows, so they certainly did cut into their starting pitching depth, which they had to do to get some offense. That was kind of the trade-off for them, unfortunately. But it is interesting. They have some more guys coming into mind, not necessarily right on the cusp of the big leagues, but they have some other good pitching prospects and to be at Double-A this year and Summit A. And, for as much problem as they've had developing hitters ever since Ben Cherington came in as GM prior to the 2020 season, they have had a pretty good pipeline of the developing pitchers. And that is something, when you look at the history of the Pirates, you think of hitters. I mean, you think of Wagner, Clemente, Stargell, Kiner, Wainer, Trainer, go down the list. And there's really never been that great pitcher in Pirate history. There's really no Hall of Fame pitchers that you really think, well, he was a Pirate, maybe Pittsburgh Pirates for a while.
Yeah. In recent years, you think of pitchers they traded away who
like
good things elsewhere.
Yeah, he'll be. Yeah. But it's just kind of an interesting dynamic because, I was born and raised here, and I'm 62 years old, so I've followed the Pirates since the early 70s, and they've always been hitting first. And this is really a departure for them to have such a strong pitching pipeline. Not that they didn't have good pitching when they won pennants and division titles, but this pitching staff has a chance to be really special in the next year or two.
Well, I imagine that the guy they're counting on to sort of break their streak of bad luck with hitters lately is Connor Griffin, who is rocketing up prospect lists, consensus top prospect in baseball, or at least the top prospect for a lot of publications. He's been extended an invite to big league camp. When will we see Connor Griffin in the big leagues?
I don't think it's out of the question, Meg, that he'll be there opening day. I wouldn't bet a large sum of money on it, but he has so far exceeded even their highest expectations when they drafted him number 9 overall 2 years ago. I don't put anything past this kid, especially after having a chance to talk to him a little bit and kind of, I don't want to say I know him well, but I at least, had a chance to at least get a feel for him. And he's a very mature kid. He's very, you talk to him and you do not think he's 19 years old. He carries himself as much older, and he's a heck of a player. He hit 21 homers, had a .333 batting average, 62 stolen bases. And, the thing of all that kind of got overlooked in the season he had last year, which was his first season in professional baseball, he only made 7 errors at shortstop. So it isn't like when Derek Jeter was making 62 errors in the South Atlantic League when he was that age.
Yeah.
This guy made 7 errors. And, and I ask scouts, because I know official scoring can be iffy, especially in the minor leagues. And I said, is he really that good? And the scouts that have seen him say, yeah, he's really that good. They wondered when they drafted him if he'd be able to stay at shortstop. They thought he might have to move to center field. But now they are convinced he's a shortstop, and not only a shortstop, but a really good defensive shortstop. And this kid, and I try not to hype these guys too much because I've seen so many failures of the Pirates over the years, of guys that were going to walk on water and what have you. The way he has gone so far, and from what every scout I talked to, everybody I talked to from outside the organization that's seen him, I never like to say somebody's a can't miss, but boy, it's going to be hard for him to miss. I mean, he's that talented.
Yeah, it's the hype really has just, it's this spring, I guess it's prospect ranking season. You could have, if you were kind of a casual baseball fan, you could have probably gone last year without hearing the name Connor Griffin, but it would be tough to do that now because he's everywhere and he's number one everywhere. And even though he didn't play more than 21 games at AA last year, if you just look at the projections, he's projected to be an above average player in the big leagues this year if they did just stick him in there in opening day. So if they don't, given their other options, I guess we'll be back where we were with Bubba Chandler last year and lamenting people being left in the minors too long. Obviously, he's so young and has so little upper level experience that I'm not saying that it's definitely service time manipulation if he doesn't open with the big club, but it's hard to imagine that it should take that long for performance reasons only because there just don't seem to be many holes in his game.
You know, and I find it interesting, Ben, you know, and I know the focus has been on all the other positions they filled and pitching, but right now, if the season started, Nick Gonzalez would be their shortstop. And I don't think Nick Gonzalez can play short. He's not very good at second base. He had minus 11 defensive runs saved last year. Yeah. So I don't know how that translates to him going on the other side of the bag to a tougher position. But yet I have not heard the Pirates linked to any shortstops the entire winter, in trade, free agent, or anything. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I just really wonder if they think Griffin is ready and they just don't want to come out and say it and put the pressure on the kid. Because like I said, they haven't even considered a shortstop. And I know they tried to get third baseman and move Triolo to shortstop, but I got the feeling they may be okay with starting the season with him. Unless he would just have a terrible spring. I mean, but I think if he holds his own in spring training, he definitely could be the opening day shortstop.
And one of the people who will be making that decision or possibly benefiting from it is Don Kelly, who was the interim manager after the firing last May of Derek Shelton, and then was extended, got a multi-year extension at the end of the season. So tell us a little bit about Kelly. I don't know that anyone was under the illusion that it was all Shelton's fault that the Pirates were not contending or that Don Kelly would be some sort of miracle worker. But how did he change things, if at all, and what gave the Pirates confidence that he was the guy to try to take them over the top?
Derek Shelton didn't have a chance, and I think Derek knew deep down he never did. He walked into a tough situation. I mean, you know, there aren't many manager jobs out there, so you take what you can get sometimes. But I will say this. The Pirates weren't very detail-oriented when Shelty was the manager here, and last year at the beginning of the year, I mean, it just was, they played so sloppy. And not the fact, I mean, I know they didn't have a whole lot of talent, but you don't need talent to at least put forth effort and do the fundamentals of the game right. And it was just sloppy. They just didn't execute at all. And to be quite honest, there were some guys that looked totally disinterested, like they'd written the season off 2 or 3 weeks into it. And I thought a change had to be made. And I know from the outside looking in, it's like, well, why would you just make your bench coach the next manager? But I'll say this, and I've known Donnie for a long time. He's a Pittsburgh guy, and I've known him going all the way back to when he was in college at Point Park, an NAIA school in downtown Pittsburgh. He was the NAIA National Player of the Year and got drafted by the Tigers. Donnie's a great baseball man. And he's got a wonderful personality where he connects with everybody. And, you know, he's like a kind of a buoyancy about him, but it's not fake like it is with some managers. He's sincere, and he he just lifts that clubhouse. Guys want to play for him. And I think players respect the fact that he wasn't a very talented player, but yet he got over 6 years of big league service time as a utility guy, and he played all 9 positions in the big leagues at one time or another. So I think he resonates with players. I think they appreciate his background. I think they appreciate, what he had to do to stay in the major leagues that long. And I think he just knows baseball too. And, beyond just the personal touch, I think he's a pretty good manager as far as running a game, especially for somebody who hadn't managed at any level. And what I was really, really impressed about, and I think it's one of the hardest, maybe the hardest thing for a new manager, is running a bullpen. And I thought he did a pretty good job of running the bullpen, and he got a lot of advantageous matchups over the course of the time that he took over for Shelton. And the Pirates gave him a multi-year deal. I believe it's 2 years. Nobody has said publicly what it is. I think this guy has a chance to be a really good manager. I really do. And just the whole attitude, just the crispness was a lot better in their play once he took over. And you can never, in Western Pennsylvania, you can never underplay how provincial the city of Pittsburgh is. When they have their own, like Don Kelly as manager, really resonates with the fans too.
And some new faces on his coaching staff, including Bill Murphy, a younger guy who came over from the Astros. So we end, as always, with our what would constitute success for this team this season. And there's so much promise here. And they're coming off yet another cellar-dwelling 71-win last-place season. What's the standard that they have to hit this year? Is it playoffs or bust? Are there other specific things that they have to do to satisfy themselves, to satisfy fans, to buy more people time in their jobs? What do you think is sort of the make or break things that we should judge the 2026 Pirates on?
Well, they keep throwing the contend word out there, and they think they can contend. And, it's not the strongest division in baseball, so I don't think it's out of the question that they could contend. I think a most realistic goal, though, would be to finish over 500 and show signs that they are on their way to contending here in the near future. I think over 500, and I know in a lot of places it's not significant, but it is significant here. They've only had 4 winning seasons in the last 33 years. So finishing over 500 means more to the fan base here than it does in most cities.
Well, I think I'll probably be watching a lot of Pirates baseball this year, which is not something that I've said a whole lot of. Granted, the Pirates probably punched above their weight on my MLB TV habits last year just because of Paul Skeens himself.
Yeah,
and
he'll do that.
and after he left the game, things didn't go so great for the Pirates always, but I probably wasn't watching by that point. But this year, with Skeens and the rest of that rotation and Griffin and everything else, there's a ton of reasons to tune in and to hope, at least. And I'm glad that you will be covering them yet again, because I don't know who else will in this media environment. I wonder, you've seen so much change locally, nationally. We've seen layoffs at MLB.com, including the Pirates beat writer. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is supposed to shut down this spring. It's going to be lonely for you to cover this team. And we talked about the Washington Post last year and everything else that's happening across the whole landscape. But what impact does that have on a local level, covering a team like the Pirates, where you want to hold the organization, the owner, to account? Who is going to be able to do that other than you?
Yeah, well, for one, it's depressing because all these guys are friends. Even though we're competitors and we're trying to beat each other on stories, when you're together as much as beat writers are over the course of a season, you can't help but become friends. I mean, you can still have that competitive advantage, but be on a friendly basis. 2, it's bad for my business when a major metropolitan newspaper is going out of business, and one of the best writers MLB.com had gets laid off. But you're right about the accountability factor. There aren't many left of us to hold the Pirates accountable, and I guess, I've always tried to do that. I've always felt that was my job, sometimes to my detriment, because the Pirates don't always like what I write. But so sometimes it's hard to get scoops. But I plan to hold them accountable. And, it'd be nice to maybe one year not have to hold them so accountable when they win some games, and you don't have to just be negative constantly. Plus, I will say this. I mean, the one thing I would like to do is cover one World Series game in my hometown before I retire. Now, whether that's going to happen, I'm not betting the ranch on it, but I just think it'd be kind of a cool way to go out, especially as someone who, obviously is closer to the end of my career than the beginning.
Well, I hope that comes true for you and also for Pirates fans, because they've been waiting a while too. And you can support John's work and follow his output on the beat at Roundtable Sports and also Yardbarker and USA Today. Just look up his social media and he will link you to all his work. And it's a pleasure to have you on yet again, John. Thanks so much.
Oh, Ben, Meg, it was great to talk with you. And I really appreciate you having me on. And it was a lot of fun.
Well, if you're a Pirates fan wondering, what's Josh Bell up to these days? I've got good news. We're about to talk about his current team. We'll take one more quick break, and we'll be back to preview the partially new look, but largely old look Minnesota Twins with the Athletic's Aaron Gleeman.
A baseball podcast, analytics and stats, with Ben and Meg from FanGraphs. Effectively wild.
Well, it's time to talk Twins, and yes, the Twins are after the Pirates in this episode. I guess that's a sign of the state of things. Their projection, slightly worse than the Pirates. Their payroll, slightly higher than the Pirates, but they're neck and neck. And we can talk about how the Twins got into that position. As always, we will be talking to Aaron Gleeman, who has been joining us for these Twins previews since darn near the start of this series and is a senior writer for The Athletic. Welcome back, Aaron.
It really makes me seem like I'm just pushing that rock up that hill constantly, like there's something wrong with me, which there is. But, yeah.
And you've been covering the Twins for a lot longer than we've been previewing them on this podcast, which is also a long time. So, yeah, you've been there. You've seen some highs, you've seen some lows, you've seen whatever this is. So I guess we should talk about who owns and runs the Twins before we talk about who plays for the Twins, because the former has a lot to do with dictating the latter. We should ask you first maybe about the control person for this team, who is named Pohlad, but it's a different Pohlad, and the fallout from that change in terms of the leadership in baseball operations and just the whole switcheroo with we're selling the team, we're not selling the team, we have minority investors. What is going on behind the scenes with the Minnesota Twins?
Well, okay, let's see.
Now you can just talk for the next half hour and we'll call it a day.
It'll be an easy edit for you guys. About 3 years ago, Jim Pohlad, who was a second-generation son of Carl Pohlad, who initially bought the Twins in the 80s, he had been running it. He's like in his 60s. He stepped down, and third-generation Joe Pohlad took over, and they initially had some success in 2023. They snapped the 2-decade playoff losing streak and all that. Then they cut payroll, back-to-back bad seasons. Last year was just a mess. So Joe Pohlad got basically pushed out by his own family, in part because of the on-field struggles, but in part because they're claiming to have $500 million in debt racked up through, I guess, high payrolls in their mind, which is sort of laughable. But about 2 months ago, Tom Pohlad, who is the older brother of Joe Pohlad, took over, and he's kind of talked a relatively big game about expecting the team to be competitive in 2026 and saying that they need to improve messaging and communications and all that to win back fans. But the problem, of course, as you hinted at, is they have like $105 million payroll, which is down $35 million from last opening day. It's down $60 million from 2023. And so it is kind of hard to blend those two things together, where you have a new owner who I don't think is much more than a fan of baseball. He's not really a ball guy, I would say, but he's a business guy, to come in and say, well, yeah, we need to win next season. We need to do this. We need to do that. And, their highest wattage move is like a $7 million signing.
Sort of related to that, it's led to shakeups in the front office. So I think we were surprised by the timing of Derek Falvey's departure. No longer the po both has been noted. Mm-hmm. So tell us about the decision, the mutual parting of ways, and sort of where that leaves baseball operations with pitchers and catchers meant to report this week.
Yeah, so I thought there was a chance when they fired Rocco Baldelli as manager at the end of the season. I thought there was some slimmer chance that Falvey would be parting ways at that point. But once they brought him back and they let him hire a new manager in Derek Shelton, and they let him do 90% of the offseason, I was like, okay, well, he's in for another year. But I think in tandem with Tom Pohlad taking over like 6 or 7 weeks ago, clearly something happened there. There was clearly some level of disagreement. My speculation is that Tom Pohlad wanted to kind of walk back the dual presidency that they had given him. Both, I like that a lot. Like, he wanted to bring in someone on the business side, and for Falvey, I guess that probably rubbed him the wrong way, because it's a bit of a demotion, if only in title. But then also, if you're Falvey, this just isn't the job that you thought you would be doing. Like, it's almost like the walls keep closing in on him. And I do think he's in a position, just talking to people around the game, he's respected enough that I think the moment his non-compete with the Twins is up, whenever that is, I think he will have no problems getting a number 2 and maybe even a number 1 job in a front office for the next hiring cycle. So part of me thinks it was mutual, in the sense that I don't think there was some big blow up and, a huge firing. But I think part of it being mutual is Falvey basically saying, why do I want this job anymore? Like, what is this even? But it's very clear that that's tied to Tom Pohlad taking over for Joe Pohlad roughly a month and a half, 2 months ago, because there were no indications that Falvey wouldn't be back. And then, like you pointed out, there's no way any team in any circumstance would plan to do this 2 weeks before spring training.
Yeah. Why would you want to stick around and be the Falvey guy?
Oh, boy.
So now that Falvey is moving on and Thad Levine has moved on to become a special advisor for the Brewers, how would you sum up this decade or so, whatever it was, of Falvey-Levine management, which obviously had some upsides and some competitive teams and some real finds, but then was so undercut by ownership in the past few years that I guess it's sort of hard to isolate the leadership versus the ownership. But how would you put a bow on that era of Twins baseball?
I think what you said is true. Like, over the last couple of years, it becomes very difficult to evaluate the front office on its own. He was hired in 2017, took over for basically 2 decades of Terry Ryan. They made the playoffs, I think, in 3 of his first 4 years. 2019 was one of the best and most fun regular seasons with the Bomba squad that they've ever had. Then they get swept out of the playoffs. 2023, they win the division and finally advance in the playoffs for the first time in 20-something years. I mean, those, relative to the Twins, those are huge successes. I think overall, I would say he was above average, but not great. I mean, I think there were some very good trades. There were some very good free agent signings, like Nelson Cruz, for instance. But Josh Donaldson, Carlos Correa, those ended up ultimately being mistakes that they kind of had to pay to get out of halfway through the contract. But I think, and Falvey talked about this, he did a Zoom on his way out, which, does lend some credence to it being somewhat mutual. Mm-hmm. And what he said a couple of times that I thought rang true was, I just really wish we could have built on the momentum of 2023. And what he didn't say in that, because he's a good soldier to the end, is I had no ability to do that. Because for them to react the way they did, coming off probably the most successful all-around season in 2 decades for the Twins by slashing payroll by $30 million, it really just gave them no opportunity to build on that. And so the last 2 years have been spent, bargain bin shopping to an even further extent than the Twins have been used to over the years. And I think if you stop the tenure at 2023, it looks pretty good. Unfortunately, everybody had to play the last 2 years, and I say that as somebody who had to watch the last 2 years.
Yeah, the clock kept running. So while we're talking about leadership changes, I guess we can talk about managers too. So Rocco out, Baldelli doesn't lend itself to a fall guy pun quite as well as Falvey did, but what was the end of him? Was he just sort of sacrificial lamb, or were there good, reasonable rationales for letting him go? And then Derek Shelton, this dovetails well with our Pirates preview because we just heard a little bit from John Perrotto about Shelton's tenure in Pittsburgh. What are the Twins hoping for, bringing in one of Rocco Baldelli's close friends to replace him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the end of Baldelli's tenure was a lot of just the cliche about a new voice is needed. And I think some of the things I just said about Falvey rings true with Baldelli too, where it's like, what chance did he really have with some of the rosters they put out there over the last year and a half, 2 years? With that said, I mean, the lack of player development on the hitting side is not necessarily, his doing on a day-to-day basis, but it falls under, something that you would blame the manager for. I really do think that was another situation where, I mean, he and Falvey are very good friends, and you could tell even at the time that Falvey was kind of pushed into doing this, or perhaps the ownership group said, we need some change of some kind. Now, little do we know, Falvey himself would be out. So I wonder how that would have gone maybe a little bit differently. But I view Baldelli as a decent major league manager too. And I think he, like you said, he's in the Dodger front office immediately. It wouldn't shock me if he's a manager or at the very least a bench coach in the next hiring cycle. I think he never had a big blow up really in the clubhouse. I think maybe some of the messaging after 6 or 7 years kind of fell on deaf ears a little bit, but like you said, they're bringing in Shelton, who was his bench coach in 2019, spent 2 total years with the Twins, and is coming from Pittsburgh, where he had one of the worst winning percentages of any manager with that number of games anyway. So it's tricky, honestly, a little bit like the other 2 levels. The front office, you're replacing Falvey with his longtime assistant, Jeremy Zoll. On the ownership side, you're just replacing one Pohlad with the older brother, another Pohlad. And then on the manager side, you're replacing Baldelli with his bench coach and very good friend. And I think ultimately it's going to be difficult to expect a whole lot of substantial changes on a day-to-day basis in terms of bullpen management or platooning or lineups, because Shelton was hired in part because he agrees with the front office and that, and he played a big role in the early days of Baldelli's tenure as manager too.
If you had told me that the Twins were going to get a 5-win season out of Byron Buxton and that he was going to play look, we have to Buxton adjust these things. So we'll say a healthy season, right? 126 games, and that they would do a midseason teardown. I would have said that that's a really cruel monkey's paw. But I'm curious sort of what you saw in Buxton last year and what your expectations are for him this year, because he had a great season at the plate. He was allowed to sort of resume center field duties. What is the current state of Byron Buxton?
Well, you're 100% right. I mean, that was there were a lot of things to get frustrated about with last season, but it did feel like they wasted a very good and very healthy by his standard season. And it just kind of felt like, what a shame. Now, it was nice that he was an all-star and he was in the home run derby, and now he's going to be in the WBC. So nationally, he's getting a little bit of props in that regard. But yeah, that was added to the frustration. I think a lot of it was his knee was finally healthy, and he had surgery 3 off seasons ago and then 2 off seasons ago. And it finally, in talking to him last year, he was just so pleasantly surprised and encouraged by how he felt on a day-to-day basis. And for him to feel healthier at 30 than he did at 25 is kind of remarkable. And, his center field play has dropped off a little bit just because some of the raw speed and athleticism, but he was incredible as a base stealer last year. He was perfect. I think 24 out of 24 or 25 out of 25. And so great at the plate. It was a bright spot. And I'm at least relatively optimistic that he can continue that, because there is the idea that they finally sort of solved what the actual knee problem was. Now, he's had tons of injuries beyond that specific knee problem, so I'm never going to pencil him in for 150 games or anything. But he began last season and ended last season with the same level of encouragement and optimism around just the health of that knee.
Boy, I'm looking at the Twins transactions, and there's not a ton to talk about there. So we will end up talking about some of the returning players probably. There were some players they didn't trade, either at the deadline sell-off or subsequently. Joe Ryan, of course, was much in demand, and they held on to him despite other teams seemingly trying to pry him away. why do you think they drew the line where they did with the deadline deals, which there were a lot of them, but it was mostly bullpen guys. And so you could say, well, it's quantity more than quality, and they can bounce back and they can contend, which I guess would be true if they had made any other investment in the roster. But was that the idea? Hey, let's hold on to Joe. We'll make another run at this thing. I know there's been some reporting that the new Pohlad, meet the new boss, mostly the same as the old boss, wants to contend without actually spending anything to make that happen. So is the idea, let's just give it another go and we'll at least give it until the deadline and see if we're in the running, and if not, that there might be more moves to make?
That's kind of my assumption, yeah. I mean, the way they positioned it during the fire sale last July was Correa is sort of a separate entity because of the contract. They paid $30 million to ditch the 100 or so million remaining on it. They, of course, haven't spent that money that they saved, but that's a different topic. They will tell you that, hey, we've built bullpens from nothing before, and so blowing up the whole bullpen and trading Duran and Jax, Louis Varland, et cetera, while some big names and a big immediate impact, they at least have some confidence that they will be able to rebuild it on the fly. I'm extraordinarily skeptical of that, given the names and the arms they have available in camp. But as far as why they didn't trade further, I think they were in talks, with the Red Sox and maybe some other teams about Joe Ryan, and they were very willing to trade him. My understanding is they felt like the offers just weren't at a level they felt were compelling. The other thing I'll say is we don't know if they would have traded Pablo Lopez, who is owed $21.5 million this year and next year, because he was on the IL with a 3-month shoulder injury. So it's possible if Lopez would have been healthy and pitching well, he might have already been traded too. As far as the soundness of a decision to just go forward with sort of a half rebuild, half stay the course, I don't really understand it completely, but I do think it sets them up. If things are not good for the first 3 months, it's very obvious that, Lopez, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober all have a year and a half left at that point under contract. They would be very prime trade candidates. You also have Ryan Jeffers, a starting catcher who's an impending free agent. And then, of course, you might get into the situation where Buxton finally says, you've pushed my loyalty to the breaking point, and I'm even willing to waive my no trade clause, where he would then be a possible trade block guy. So, yeah, I think it's not necessarily, guaranteed to be another sell-off. They could surprise. That's clearly what they're trying to push to fans, that they can maybe hang around 500 and avoid another sell-off. But my expectation, looking at even the state of this division, which is normally not that impressive, I think they're setting themselves up to be underwhelming for 3 months and then another trade deadline fire sale.
Oh boy, I want to give Twins fans something to hold on to here, which makes me transitioning to a question about Royce Lewis feel kind of cruel. But I remain fascinated by Lewis, because the book on him coming out was like, oh, if he could only stay healthy, look what he's able to do at the plate. This guy loves to hit home runs. He loves to hit grand slams. Like, this is such an exciting bat. And then, the last 2 years where he has been healthy in comparison to the 2022 and 23 seasons, it has just not come together for him at the plate. And in his fullest season, still not one that managed to completely avoid the IL, he was only an 85 WRC plus hitter, a 1-win player. So what can we expect out of Lewis at this point? Because I feel like we're maybe lowering our expectations from go hit grand slams to hit some home runs, please.
I still believe that he has, all-star level upside. My suspicion is that all of the injuries, and it was remarkable, like you said, that he would just miss months at a time and come back and homer in his first at-bat usually. But I think at some point that takes a toll physically, and he just seemed sort of not the same version of himself in terms of speed, athleticism. The swing got a little bit long. I think he got exploited a little bit in terms of how opponents started to pitch him and maybe wasn't able to adjust right away. But I will give him credit. He transitioned to third base. He was once upon a time a shortstop before the 2 torn ACLs. And I thought he was much improved at third base last year. It's just that nobody cared because his hitting really fell off so much. So I still think if you told me that they had another all-star besides Buxton in the lineup this upcoming season, I would probably guess that it would be Royce Lewis. But I think we're going to learn, this could be kind of a make or break year for him, not in terms of his overall career, but in terms of with the Twins, because he's still got a couple more years under team control. But I think there's been some frustration on both sides just with the injuries and the, stalled development and the drop off. And I think he wants to feel like he's still a big part of their long-term plans, but they want to see from him that he's producing at a level that can make them feel confident with that. I mean, the truth is, if he has a good first half and is mostly healthy, and they have a bad first half, I could absolutely see him joining the mix as a trade deadline guy too.
How about some of the other holdovers, guys who are kind of in that 28 range, maybe former prospects who were made good in some respects, but perhaps haven't fully blossomed, but there's still hope, or, James Outman, who's around here, or Matt Wallner, or Ryan Jeffers, who's become a pretty good catcher, or Trevor Larnach. There's a bunch of guys in that sort of 28, 29 range where I guess they're sort of figuring out what they have in them and whether they're going to keep them around.
I mean, injuries have been a huge detriment for most of those guys, but a lot of them just haven't developed. And I think they've now switched out the hitting coaches 3 years in a row. I think Baldelli got blamed for some of that too. There's just, and you didn't even mention, like, they've already parted ways with Jose Miranda,
right? Edward
Julian, both of whom once upon a time seemed like kind of core pieces. And there's most of those other names that you just mentioned, I think, are in sort of prove it or leave mode at this point. And I think a lot of that has become a huge talking point about why do they have these first round picks who are top 100 prospects? They do well in the minors. Some of them do very well right away in the majors. And then either because of injuries or stalled development or, whatever the case, they just don't take a step forward. And the Twins now are basically in their third straight year of just rolling that same core group of like 6 to 8 hitters back out there and just hoping things come together. And I would say, if anything, collectively, that group's stock has dropped year over year during that time. So I mean, they do have some very good prospects. Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Kalen Culpepper on the position player side that I think could join the lineup by midseason. And I think what you're going to see is whoever hits well out of that group, some of the names you mentioned, including Royce Lewis, is going to stick around, and whoever doesn't is going to make way for what they hope is a new wave that'll have a little bit more success. But, the payroll cuts and the changes behind the scenes and injuries have gotten a lot of the attention over the last 2 years for the Twins' struggles. But I think really the biggest core issue and the thing that is less explainable really than the other stuff is just why have they had this group of like a half dozen or so, prime aged hitters, almost all of whom were first round picks, almost all of whom came with big expectations, and almost all of whom had initial success. And then you look 2 or 3 years later and they really have no core of the lineup with that same group.
The guys that they brought in this offseason, and we should talk about the additions that they made, even if they are likely to end up trade bait if they hit well at all. I don't know that we'd call them prime age, Past their prime feels mean, but they're not young guys anymore. So what do they see in Josh Bell and Victor Caratini?
I think Josh Bell is just sort of, signs 1 year deals year after year, joins some lineup, bats fifth, hits 20 homers.
He has to have the best vibes in baseball, because the way that guy has been able to just keep stringing jobs together, like a lot of it has to be vibes, right?
I can attest to this. So actually, my editor at The Athletic, Maria Torres, who covered Josh Bell in previous years, the Nationals were in town to play the Twins like in June, and she sent me to go interview Josh Bell because if he were to be traded last year, he would be the first player in Major League history to be traded at 4 straight deadlines. And so that's a difficult topic for a person like me to bring up with a complete stranger in the visiting clubhouse. And so I tried to kind of warm him up with some hitting talk and stuff. But I will say I had like a 15-minute conversation that was roughly, how come people keep signing you and trading you? And he could not have been lovelier in that conversation. And so I get why the Twins, if they're choosing between, $7 million veteran bats, why they would have chosen Bell. Switch hitter, he had a good second half, cut his strikeout rate. He can definitely pop 20, 25 homers.
There's a lot of swing speed stuff. Like
yes, exactly.
Is that does that mean that he's suddenly going to break out at age 33 or whatever it is after a few sub-replacement level or replacement level seasons?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe aging counteracts whatever benefit you get from that. But I guess there's reason to dream at least.
Yes. I mean, I think they were trotting out, Eddie Julian and Cody Clemens and guys like that at first base last year. So I think there was, if you're going to attempt to be competitive, you at least needed another, I would say two. They really only added one veteran bat. And I think he checks that box. Obviously, $7 million fits their price range. And Caratini, he also is making $7 million, but the surprise with him is that he got a 2-year deal, which is the first multi-year contract they handed out since Correa 3 years ago. To do that for a kind of a high-end backup catcher seemed a little weird, although it sounds like he's going to play maybe 50 games at catcher and maybe another 50 games at first base DH, which is fine, I guess, but also his bat, while good for a catcher, is below average for first base DH. So it's a little bit of how cheap can they check the maximum number of boxes, I think, with both those guys.
Well, should we talk about the pitching? I guess that might be a bit better in some respects, at least. Tell us about Pablo Lopez and how he's looking, because he missed a big chunk of last year, came back to make a few starts in September. So is the hope that he will be unimpeded and back to his best self?
Yeah, I talked to him like 3 weeks ago, I guess, at Twins Fest, and he basically said, I'm 100%. I've had a full offseason. He'll be ramped up for spring training. Now, it's worth noting Lopez and Joe Ryan are both exiting right away for the WBC. Mm-hmm. So they won't even be in camp. Taj Bradley, who's another potential starter, is also WBC bound for Team Mexico. So it's going to be kind of a weird situation with the rotation. Lopez is, if there's reason for optimism, it's Lopez and Ryan atop the rotation. I mean, pretty much every team official, including the owners, kind of pivot back to the strength of the rotation, both in terms of frontline quality in those two, but also just overall depth, including some of the guys they picked up at the deadline last year, as kind of the basis for any optimism. And I don't think that's crazy. I mean, I think Lopez and Ryan are both very good number 2, decent number 1 type of starters, all-star caliber. I think Bailey Ober, if healthy, can be that type of guy. And they do have, some of those prime age 25 to 28-year-old arms that could fill out the rest of the rotation. But I think given the state of the bullpen and the state of the lineup that we just talked about, it's not enough to just have a pretty good rotation, which I think they have. And I'll also say Lopez missed basically half the season with a shoulder injury and ended the year with a weird elbow forearm thing, but that was just because he dove on a play at first base. So he's fine for that. But Bailey Ober was hurt for almost all of last season and tried to pitch through it with bad results. And then Joe Ryan finally had kind of a full healthy season, except he really faded pretty badly after the All-Star break, whether that was just kind of wearing down, whether the trade deadline stuff kind of wore on him, which he talked about a little bit. So I don't think Lopez, Ryan, Ober as a trio is quite as guaranteed to be near the top of the league as probably optimistic Twins fans would hope. But if there is a path to have a winning record and be in the playoff picture down the stretch, I think at least 2 of those 3, if not all 3, have to have very good seasons.
You mentioned the bullpen and how it's a little bit shaky. They did make some changes there. They brought back Taylor Rogers. Taylor, not Tyler. Taylor. And then also, made some trades and some waiver claims. Talk to us about how that group is sort of going to shake out and what they expect to get from Rogers in this go-around.
It's strange because when they traded Taylor Rogers 4 years ago, he was, I think, one of the more underrated relievers in the league, probably. He was an all-star closer, setup man. Now he's, lost some miles per hour. Strikeout rates are down. Walks are up a little bit. I think in a normal, good bullpen situation, he's probably maybe a number 2 lefty, maybe a 6th or 7th inning guy. I think if the season started today, he's their closer, if only because he has experience doing that. I mean, I think this bullpen group, the top of the depth chart is a 34-year-old Taylor Rogers, Cole Sands, who had a disappointing year last year, Justin Topa, who's just sort of a run-of-the-mill middle reliever, Cody Funderburk, Eric Orzi, Travis Adams. These are, maybe 7th or 8th guys in a normal bullpen. I do think they're going to probably add at least one more right-handed reliever between now and opening day. But if you look at the free agent market, that pool is pretty shallow at this point in terms of guys you'd want to count on in the late innings. And I also think they're going to use the rotation depth and move at least 1 and possibly 2 or 3 starters from a group of, Taj Bradley, Simeon Woods-Richardson, Mick Abel, David Festa, Zebby Matthews. There's really only room for 2 of those guys in the rotation after Lopez, Ryan, and Ober. And I think if only by necessity, they need some arms in that bullpen who can have upside. And it's a bad situation, and it speaks to them trading off their 5 best relievers at the deadline, that the best chance to kind of find late inning relievers might be sacrificing some of your rotation depth, but also almost every good reliever in modern Twins history, including Duran, Jax, and Varland that they just traded away, have been, quote unquote failed starters. So I don't think it's a crazy idea. I just have real questions about how quickly those guys can transition to being trusted bullpen arms.
Your mention of Ober reminded me that he and Simeon Woods-Richardson were a couple of the players who put up some sort of statement or Instagram post about what's been happening in Minneapolis. And I know that I saw a statement from Tom Pohlad, or I guess there was some sort of season ticket holder event where he said something extremely mealy-mouthed about not wanting to pick sides and how things are being gone about in this community, which is an amazing passive voice construction right now, is not good. Strong statement from Tom Pohlad. So has the team said anything, done anything? Has there been pressure put on the team? Do you think that as pitchers and catchers are reporting, and maybe camp happening in Florida insulates people from being questioned about ICE and other agencies essentially invading the Twin Cities, but I wonder whether the response has met the moment or whether anyone really expected the Twins to say or do anything, either as an organization or players.
I mean, it really hasn't, like you said, it was kind of, they've tried to play the middle a little bit and comment as little as they can. I think I'm not going to give them credit for that, but I will say something we've seen in the Twin Cities over the last half decade is a real change in even just something as simple as, public statements compared to what was not that long ago with the killing of George Floyd. And I think if you compare, places, Fortune 500 companies or places like the Twins, their reaction to that versus their reaction now, it is noticeably different. And I think whether that is an attempt from a PR standpoint to just not get involved and not, as the cliche goes, piss off half your audience, no matter what side you take. I don't love that. I think that is sort of what they're attempting to do. I think some things you hear about the Pohlads behind the scenes might suggest they would be more willing to make at least statements supporting the community. But I also think they're in a very difficult situation where everyone is very angry at them already. And so clearly it's frustrating, but clearly their approach, at least so far, has been, let's not get involved. Let's give kind of the most nothing answers to these questions possible. I think that's probably going to continue. I go back and forth personally about whether I need the billionaires, owners of teams to make statements about such things, or whether I need players to make such, statements about such things. I do. When I see Ober or Simeon Woods-Richardson, it does not surprise me that those are 2 of the guys who are at least, on social media making their voice heard. And I do feel good about that, but I'm trying to get better personally about not holding it against players who don't speak up on that, and not, trying to extrapolate from there what their true feelings are or anything. But yeah, I would say if Twins fans are expecting a lot more on this topic from players or especially owners, I think they're probably going to be disappointed.
Well, I don't know how to pivot from that to asking about another Twins player, but I will try to. One bright spot, at least, for the Twins last year was Luke Keeschel, who came up. I know he was up briefly in April, but then came up again after the big sell-off at the deadline and gave Twins fans a reason to cheer again, because he had just an incredibly hot start and ended up with solid numbers in a small sample. But, younger guy who showed something in his first look at the big leagues. How much should fans continue to be excited about him?
He was very impressive. And I think to do that while basically in between Tommy John surgery on one side and then a broken arm on the other side is probably doubly impressive. He was very good offensively, looked to me like just an ideal, table setting 280 hitter who draws walks, hits balls into the gaps, runs well on the bases. I think defensively he struggled, particularly throwing, but it's possible that was just because he was coming back from Tommy John surgery. Buxton and Keisha were the two bright spots last year offensively. They were really the only bright spots. And so I do have high hopes for him. I think he's going to be a very good hitter. I have some questions about where he's going to wind up defensively. And the other thing is he's slotted in to play second base. And I think this season he'll get every opportunity to show that the throwing can improve the further he gets from Tommy John surgery. But just overall, this defense is really stretched at a lot of positions. Like their double play duo of Keisha and Brooks Lee, I think will be among the worst in the league. If they end up playing Josh Bell a lot at first base, that's pretty bad. Jeffers and Caratini are poor throwing duo behind the plate. And Buxton's still very good in center, but you have guys like Wallner and Larnach, et cetera, in the corners who are really bad outfielders. So I think there's a lot of optimism, rightfully, about Keisha as a top of the lineup kind of building block guy. And I think that's going to be the case, but he needs to figure out, can he be a passable second baseman, or is he more of a left fielder, first base, DH, which would take a little bit of the air out of the offensive upside. But yeah, I mean, I have high hopes for him. And I think even someone like Brooks Lee, who has not hit well and through 2 seasons, I think can still be a pretty good hitter, but I have real questions, more so than even with Keisha, about him as a shortstop.
You mentioned 2 of the guys earlier who might help them to bolster that outfield, but I wonder about the timing of them getting called up, given sort of what the state of the team is. What do you think it would take for us to see Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez this year?
I had hoped that the path would be a little more cleared for them to kind of hit their way into the plans, but my assumption was they would trade or non-tender Trevor Larnach, who's been pretty underwhelming the last 2 or 3 years. They did not do that. He's making $4.5 million, along with Wallner. They also acquired Alan Roden as a corner outfielder from the Blue Jays in the trade deadline deal for Louis Varland. So he's crowding that. There's a real logjam of left-handed hitting corner bats, and of course they add Bell and Caratini to that as switch hitters. You still have Cody Clemens. Now, Walker Jenkins is good enough that those guys shouldn't really matter. Like if he hits 300 for a month and a half at AAA, there should be room made for him. But I do wonder, is it going to take injuries or an unexpected trade maybe between now and opening day to really clear a path for them to get to the majors before the second half? Because the way they moved Jenkins last year in the lower minors, I mean, he reached AAA at 20 after being very, very good at AA. I think they have shown a willingness to push him pretty aggressively. And the same thing with Culpepper and Emmanuel Rodriguez. With Rodriguez, it's really just a question of, can he stay healthy?
Right.
Because he played all of last year at AAA. He just only played, a couple months healthy. So I think by the All-Star break, Jenkins, Rodriguez, and possibly Kalen Culpepper should be in the mix. But yeah, it's not necessarily clear where that will come and kind of what moves would need to happen or who they would have to sour on to clear room for them before that.
Well, our traditional closing question: what would constitute success for the Twins in 2026?
Oof. Well,
always a great sign when it starts with oof.
I feel like Chris Collinsworth last night after the interception, where he was just like,
I don't know what he was going for there.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going for here. I have been trying to wrestle with what my personal definition of competitive means, because Tom Pohlad continues to use that phrasing for what he expects of the Twins in 2026. And I think, to me, that means 500 competitive. And, everyone's mileage may vary on that. I think 500 in this division will at least keep you in the mix through most of September, which I guess would be kind of a victory for relative to the payroll and the expectations. I don't know that that's going to necessarily win back fans, so it isn't that much of a positive, but I think a winning record, or at least a 500 record, would qualify as success for the Twins.
Let me ask you this. If this is not a success for the Twins, and if it's clear that it's not going to be one at the deadline and they do another sell-off of some sort, do you think that would just be another temporary setback? Or are we talking real rebuild and years of non-contention? How long a potential rebuild or reload are we looking at in that case?
I mean, I am worried that if they cut payroll further, they won't bring it back up. And I think we're already sort of seeing that. But I also think, because of some of the prospects we mentioned and a few more, they have a pretty decent farm system, usually ranked somewhere in the 10-ish range. And I think about 8 of their top 10 prospects are major league ready, either are going to begin the year at AAA, have already played a little in the majors. So I think even if you trade Lopez, Ryan, or even someone like Buxton, you're clearly taking a big step back, and that's not going to be popular. And probably for 2027, that means you're not going to be competitive. But I don't think they're that far away from having like a new young core. Now, pessimistic Twins fans would say, well, they had that 5 years ago, and we just spent 20 minutes talking about how that core kind of crumbled. So I'm not guaranteeing anything, but I do think they're in this weird spot where they only have like 3 or 4 like good veterans left. And I don't know that selling off those good veterans are going to hurt the future that much, because the majority of those guys are only under team control through 2027 anyway. So I think one way or the other, Lopez, Ryan, Jeffers, these guys are not going to be around the Twins, if only from like a payroll standpoint, in 2028 and beyond. And so I think there is room for them to sell off those guys, add more major league ready prospects, and kind of regroup for 2028. But also Twins fans are understandably kind of tired of hearing about the next wave and the next core, because the last couple versions of that have been pretty underwhelming.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, even if the Twins are not necessarily a pleasure to talk about. And Aaron and Dan Hayes do a great job of covering the team over at The Athletic, so do check that out and support them. And, of course, you can catch Aaron on his Twins podcast, Gleeman and the Geek. Thanks, as always, Aaron. It's not a season preview series without having you on.
I would say it was fun. I don't know fun given the topic, but it's always enjoyable to talk to you guys. Thank you.
We didn't have fire alarms this time.
Yeah. That's a real, was that like 3 years ago, maybe? Yeah. But you guys,
Live in infamy.
You guys did too good of a job editing that.
Yeah, people
so I
might
feel
not
like
know what you're talking about.
It's an inside
true.
joke for like 3 people. But that works.
True.
Yeah, I don't remember how much of that made it to air, but one of our previews was interrupted several times by fire alarms at Aaron's hotel. Anyway, we had
several dozen times. Yeah.
Fire sales to discuss instead of fire alarms. Maybe that's an improvement. Probably not. Thanks, Aaron.
See ya.
Okay, one more passing of a former Effectively Wild guest to report. I suppose we can't call this one untimely, but Ron Teasley, who is one of 2 surviving Negro Leagues players from the period that is now classified by MLB as Major League, died at 99. He played for the New York Cubans of the Negro National League in 1948, and he joined us on episode 1887. Do check that out if you haven't already. His death leaves 101-year-old Bill Greason as the sole surviving Negro Leaguer from that Major League period. One of the reasons that I like talking to former players on the podcast is that they don't live forever. Who does? And interviewing them is one way of preserving their memories and insights for posterity. Also, don't know if you need any more football content from us today, but I saw a post on Blue Sky by one Scott Spratt, who linked to an article at NBC Sports that was an aggregation of an interview on Sirius XM NFL radio. And Spratt posted, Devin Witherspoon revealed in a radio interview that Mike McDonald identified from film study that the Patriots offensive linemen were effectively tipping their pitches with their stances. Put that in the pantheon of Super Bowl coaching contributions. Here's the excerpt. Witherspoon says tape study revealed that the Patriots offensive linemen often show what they're going to do by how they line up. We had a tell on their guards and their tackles how they like to set. They're going to overset on certain rushes. They're going to fall for certain moves anytime a group of guys get after them. And today, I think we did that. You know I'm sort of a skeptic when it comes to pitch tipping, but not so much when it comes to tape study and tendencies in football. There, I think you can commonly pick things up. I don't know if the Seahawks needed the extra help against the left side of the Pats O-line, but that would help account for why that was such a weak spot in the Super Bowl. Not that it hadn't been before. That'll do it for today. Thanks as always for listening. Brewers and Rangers most likely up next. You can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Ethan Edgehill, Jonathan Corlett, Jason Shepard, Leonard Schlattbaum, and Nick Sandberg. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, shout-outs at the end of episodes, potential podcast appearances, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes in the podcast post at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We'll be back with our next episode soon. Talk to you then.
Just a couple of baseball nerds. They'll still be speaking statistically, rambling romantically, pontificating pedantically, bantering bodily, drafting discerningly, giggling giddily, equaling effectively wild.